And so that second phase of life, it can start at different times. But for most of the families we deal with, it's when they wake up and they go, I have enough, I can stop. Or I think I have enough, can I stop? But either way, I don't want to spend the next 20 to 30 years doing the same things I did the last 20 to 30 years. And when they have that realization, it's scary at first. Some call it a midlife crisis. And so what, in my mind, I'm always dealing with are midlife crisis millionaires. Right? These are successful people they're millionaires, but they're in a midlife crisis. And maybe it's not a crisis, but it's a midlife transition.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Dane Czaplicki, who runs a family office. We'll delve into what that is and how it can help you manage your wealth.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com.
Making money is a lot easier than keeping money and protecting money. Each of these is a different skill and it requires different knowledge. Most of us tend to focus on how do I make more money? Of course, most of us spend our time spending more money and not even thinking about that. That's a different skill. Which skill do you have? Are you good at making money? Are you good at keeping money? Are you good at protecting and growing money? Today, we're going to talk about how to manage wealth, how to make it generational from a tactical standpoint. We'll talk about what a family office does and how it might help you. As you'll hear, you don't have to be a billionaire to have one like in the past. Today, you don't have to have that much wealth to get this kind of help. Dane is the co-founder of Members Wealth with over 20 years of experience in financial services. His career spans investment analysis, portfolio management, and leadership roles at firms like West Capital Management and the Vanguard Group. He actually has a background in biology, a CFA charter, and an MBA from Wharton. He blends rigorous academic training with extensive industry expertise. He's built a team of high achievers focused on delivering great client services, and they put together a team to help you grow, keep, and maintain your wealth and pass it down to the next generation. Let's meet Dane and see how they do it. Welcome to Richer Soul, Dane Czaplicki. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up? And how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I had a great childhood. Growing up was fun, but didn't teach me much about money. Mom and dad were blue collar, warehouse and teacher, and really the only conversations we had about money is there never seemed to be enough of it. And they lived paycheck to paycheck and were relying on pensions and Social Security, so they weren't saving for retirement or talking stocks or bonds. And I started to develop an interest outside of them in some junior high classes, watching some TV shows and starting to hear about it. and realizing after a number of years of getting the sweepstakes mailers that we weren't going to win, that we had to figure out how to make money. But in eighth or ninth grade, there wasn't really classes for money, economics, finance. And I was math and science, went that route. But every chance I got, I tried to learn a little bit about investing and got some inspiration along the way. Actually, a junior year English teacher told me about the money he made in percentage terms. And I was just taking a math class where compound interest was really starting to set in, and that power of time and money. And I ended up going to school for biology and off to veterinary school. But the whole time I was studying about how to buy real estate, buy investment properties. I invested my graduation money when I turned 18 into the stock market. This was the mid 90s at that point. And so I was very much self-taught, but I made a lot of the common early mistakes that people made because I was self-taught. But that also, I'll credit that with the discipline and the strategy, that I have now. Mom and dad, especially mom, she was a teacher. She always emphasized education, college, and I value that very much. I got that undergrad degree. I ultimately went back and got my business degree, but I put myself through what's called the CFA to focus really deeply on money and investing. And you and I hit it off right out of the gates because your library of books, right? So I read extensively. Once I decided to leave the sciences and pursue finance in 99, 2000, I read every book I could get my hands on. And that combination of having nobody teach me and make a lot of hard mistakes early, and then reading a lot, really allowed me to build the foundation for what I had today. But it wasn't really until early 2000s, my now wife was on a plane and the person next to her was reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it hit home so easily because I was raised in a family about hard work, education, go to college, get a job. And I did all those things. And when I read about Rich Dad versus Poor Dad, I was like, man, I was raised by poor dad. Loving parents, feared losing things, scarcity mindset. And I didn't want to give up all those good things that I learned from poor dad, so to speak, poor mom. But it was that blend of rich dad. And so I picked up real early. I was already far along in my journey to start building real estate and buying real estate. And I love the stock market and other investments, but real estate really helps you build a solid foundation of income producing assets. And one of the other big lessons from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, well, there was a lot, but I realized I was trading my time for money. And if I wasted that money, I was wasting my time. And once I kind of pulled that all together and understood that you could work for somebody else, you could work for yourself, you could own a business, or you could invest. Luckily for me, I invested early on and built up a big war chest of compounding assets and realized from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you never sell your assets. So you work, you trade your youthful energy. My parents did teach me to work hard. So you work hard, you trade that money, not for doodads, as they say in the book, or liabilities, but assets that will produce income. And then I was able to use that income later in life when I finally made the decision, it's time to build a business. And we can get into that later maybe, but when you start a business, you want to make sure you have a rock solid foundation because it's not always straight up success right out of the gates. and you know that. So having that foundation and those years of experience, both on the rich and the poor dad, and the education and the trial and error, all culminated into my experience with money today.
I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. Like I couldn't figure out how to make it work for me. And that was my biggest struggle with that book was how do I implement it in a way that I can make money? And part of the reason why is I would look at real estate, and depending on where you are, a lot of times it didn't cash flow well. So how do you find real estate that cash flows well? How do you put the deal together? How do you evaluate risk and all those types of things? Now, once I did it, I figured it all out. Okay. But until I did it, It was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, I think doing it and learning, starting small when you're young and not much to lose, is invaluable, right? And like I would answer that question or that comment a lot differently to somebody that's 23 versus somebody that's 53. And it wasn't called house hacking. The word I was told in the 90s was called be a den father, and that, live in the house you buy and rent out as much of it as you can. And so I needed a place to live anyway. And so can we rent out space in the house and help pay for the mortgage? And so cash flow, I looked at it, but it was more of a early on. And this is why I think young folks should try it. You need a place to live anyway, right? And so you can pay rent or you can own the property and collect rent. And if you own the property and collect rent, you start to learn how to depreciate a hammer, right? Like little things, right? Little things like buy a hammer, I can expense it, put a fence in, I can depreciate it, right? And so you learn a lot. I'm a big believer in you got to touch the stove. You can read books and stand on the shoulders of giants, but you got to try things. You got to get out there and try things.
And I concur. You have to go out and do it. And like I said, once we did it, then it was a no-brainer. Then it became quick and easy. But the first time, it was difficult. I think the problem I had when I was young is I was making good money. And good is the
enemy of great.
Yeah, good's the enemy of great. And that's literally, I think, what happened through a good part of it. Now, I still built paper wealth. So I had the ability to do it all. It wasn't like I wasn't saving. It just wasn't going the extra mile for some of those things. Now I look around, I'm like, damn, had I bought those houses back then? They're all up like
yeah, we all
ridiculous percentages. Yeah, but at the end of the day, real estate is work. And you can't forget that. There are ways to make it less and less work, but at the end of the day, it is still work. And you got to figure out if that works for you or not.
And I think it's kind of like almost like anything. It's not for everybody.
No.
But if you start small, you try it out, there's not much you can lose on the first one. If you hate it, don't do more of it. But if it's okay, my wife and I built up a tolerance for it. Now it's no big deal. It just becomes it is part of our lives, right? We don't think much about it. We just collect the checks and occasionally get that call. You're like, yeah, got to deal with that. But
that is always the case. So you then converted and started your own business.
Yeah. So I took the conservative approach early on and got experience working W-2 for other wealth management firms. And I spent a bulk majority of my time on the investment side of the wealth management business, really finding all the best investments for our clients. And I loved it. I mean, I was in the weeds and just traveling the world and looking stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity, you name it. We were looking for really good investments. And I had the opportunity to work in a spectrum of different places, from Vanguard, which is low cost, passive, buy the index, keep your costs low, be tax efficient, all the way up to the ultra high net worth with families that were billion dollars and higher. And when you work in those two really far apart places, you learn a lot about different types of investing. So it was a really good experience. What I found, though, is every year I would go in and ask for more money, to make more money, and they would give it to me. And I'd walk out and go, oh, all right, so I just enough so I walk out and feel all right. But every year I wanted to make more. And eventually I was making so much, I was like, if I'm making this much, they must be making more, right? Like otherwise, so I must be pretty valuable, right? Like what am I missing? And I knew about the quadrants from Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I was clearly an employee. Now I'd skipped over and had investments too at that point, but that middle, being the business owner, just wasn't there. And I eventually, I guess, got to that part of my life where I realized I had to concentrate on what was most important to me for the second part of my life. So I think it hits most people in their mid 40s. A lot of our clients are this, right? They're super successful. They've grinded it out, did what they had to do, learned, trial and error, jobs, 20 to 30 years. And then they wake up one day and say, is this all there is? Right? And some of them, they change careers, some retire early, some build businesses. But what I found was I had a passion for helping people go through what I went through, which is parlaying your success in a conservative manner so as to not destroy all that you've built, but to also take that leap and risk into the next phase of your life where you increasingly concentrate on those things that are the most important to you. And when we launched Members Wealth, and I did it with some people from my past that we've worked in different roles together. And I'd like to say, been nothing but blue skies. Of course, you have your ups and downs when you start a business, but it's been really good to see the success and see our families and our clients achieve that transition into retirement, into owning a business, starting a business, new career. Most of them come and go, can I do that? And we help them find a way. And the answer is yes, but you should be prepared. So it took a while, but now here we are. So.
And it always does take a while. It's just the reality of figuring it out for you. I know one of the things that you attended, and I think maybe you still do, is GoBundance. I've been out to there. We've had quite a few of their members on the podcast over the years. What kind of drew you to that, and how does it help you?
Yeah, there was a number of things. Benefit of hindsight, my mom told me to always keep in touch with people. And so I kept in touch with my elementary school friends, my high school friends, college friends, business school friends, right? All the different places I've ever worked. I know at least a handful of people and kept in touch with. And I was purposeful in that. And then I'm pretty driven and I like accountability. And but I know that ends at some point, right? Like I can only hold myself so accountable. I need help from others, and those two things start to come together into what my core values are, which is grow and learn every day, relationships, ownership or accountability, and then wanderlust, which is travel. And one day I was listening to a podcast, and they were interviewing one of the founders at GoBundance. Actually, I'd been listening to a lot of podcasts for 4 or 5 years, and I would hear about GoBundance, but I thought it was tied to a charity, Philabundance here in Philly. It wasn't until I heard the interview where he described the 6 pillars without saying the name GoBundance, and I was like, what is this organization? And I was like, wow. So I got online. I was physically shaving. I was listening to a podcast and got online right while I was doing it, and applied right there, signed up, and it's been nothing but great for me. I mean, I don't know how much you know about it. It sounds like you do, but you get thrown into 800 to 1,000 guys across the country that are like you, right? They're driven, they're successful, they're 30, 40, 50, 60s. They're in that range. They're on paper what everybody would say is successful, but they're looking for more, and they're strong in some areas and weak in others. And they want to be part of a group that raises them up. I found when I launched Members Wealth, this is another characteristic. It's lonely at the top, right? You think, oh, I'm going to start your own business, and you're starting with all your friends and partners, and you think it's equal. But ultimately, the buck stops with you, and you have to find a way to adjust to a new role that you've never had. And it's hard to talk to your family and friends and your employees about that. So now you have a network of people to talk about that with. And you get assigned to a GoPod, which is a concentrated group of 5 or 6 gentlemen that are from all over the country that are your accountability board. We meet once a week. We've laid out our 5-year vision, our 1-year vision, our quarterly goals, or our quarterly rocks. We even hold each other accountable to the 5 most important things we got to do each day, and we check in on each other. And they can be around health, they can be around business, family. It's pretty good. I joined for the accountability and for the network and meeting new people. And I came away real quickly with an evolution and an evolutionary step or leap even in the relationship with my wife and my kids, which I had great relationships. But looking back, I'd say I had good relationships. Now I have great because we focus on them. So it wasn't just focus on business or focus on money. It was a focus on health and travel. I travel more. Right? Because of my upbringing, we talked about money. I had a scarcity mindset. So I've always maxed my 401k, saved money, lever up, pay down the debt, save, invest. And we had our 1 or 2 week trip a year, Jersey Shore, we're from the East Coast here, maybe to the lakes, but we didn't travel extensively. And they got me to fill my calendar first. With the wanderlust, my core value. It's a core value of mine. It was always last, and they helped me reverse it. Put time with friends and family, and travel, and fill your calendar first. You still get everything else done, Rocky. You still get everything else done.
Oh, yeah.
Even more so. And so there's some things that we picked up. Like some people think of discipline as freedom, like we all do at GoBundance. Other people think of discipline as prison, right? Or planning takes time and eats up my time, or planning frees my time. And so it's a mindset. And I think discipline and planning, are ways and paths to freedom, to work less, not work more. And having a group of guys that all think the same and work to think the same and hold each other accountable, it's been a pretty good network. So,
and it's important to find networks and find the one that works for you, because not everything is for everybody. And these groups change over time too. So if it's not serving you in the future, then you make a shift and you go find groups that do serve you and that help you pull forward. And that's all there is to it. But yeah, I see so much crossover just in people I meet randomly, and it turns out they're in these different groups, and it's amazing how that all kind of comes to be.
Well, when you read as much as I do, you start to see the overlap in a lot of the books, right? Like there's only so many core values and principles, and I mean you can go all the way back to 5,000 years ago in the Chinese, or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and Christian and Christ, and bring it all the way forward to the modern philosophers. And I'm a big Adam Smith fan. And then you can go all the way up to the people that write the books today. And it's similar with GoBundance. Like you get into the core values, and those core values have a lot of overlap with a lot of other organizations and a lot of books. I think if you join the right one at the right time with the right people, you can get a lot out of it. I think the biggest part is shining light on your life and living a life of purpose and intention, and surrounding yourself with people that care about you and you care about them. The name of the organization probably less important, as long as you're gathering some of those attributes from the relationships.
And that's a key part of it, right? Finding the right group, because even within organizations, if you're not in the right group of people and it doesn't work for you, then you kind of got to go look at it again in another way. So yeah, that makes total sense. So you started a business. Basically, you have a family office. Can you explain what a family office is and what they do?
Yeah, sure. I would say we're actually what I would call a multi-family office. It's a play off of family office. And for those that aren't familiar, it harkens back to like the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, some of the more successful families back in the day. And what they found is they were great at making money in their respected trade, whether it was boats or steel or oil, etc. But they were losing the money just as fast out the back door to fraud, bad investments, liabilities or legal problems, taxes. And back then, there wasn't as much regulation as there is now. And they kind of woke up and said, hey, we run this great business, but then on our personal side with our money, it's like the Stone Ages, right? Like it's awful. And they said, what we need are people that are on our staff to run things right? Look at the risk, the investments, the tax, the estate, and run it right. And really look at all that. People that don't have a conflict, that are paid by us to do it right. And so they built an internal investment office or a family office. But these were billion-dollar families, and it cost millions of dollars to run these because you need staff. And when you have staff, now you need technology and compliance and office space. And so through the years, the earlier part of my career, multifamily office meant you worked with families that had 500 million and higher. And the idea there was scale, right? So instead of one family with 5 billion, maybe you had 10 families with 500 million. So you had 5 billion altogether and you shared resources. And it was actually, in some ways, much better than working for one family, right? Because you weren't beholden to the one family, right? And so I learned real early in my career that you might be better off working in a multifamily office than a single family. And then because of my upbringing where there was no money around, I was always insecure around people with lots and lots of money, thinking, why would they hire me when they have all this money? Now, I've gotten over that. And I realized they hire me because my job is to preserve, grow, and make their money endure, right? And my job wasn't to run their steel mills, right? My job was to protect their money, and they weren't good at it, and we were. And then I wanted to give back to successful first generational families. And so we wanted to create a multifamily office for the people that generated the wealth, whether they were business owners or just hard workers, but basically got to that point in their life where a lot of our families are, all of our families are super smart, hardworking, and successful by definition. But a lot of them were do-it-yourselfers up to a point. And Rocky, you like me have read a lot of these books where they teach you to begin to outsource, right? And focus on what you do best. 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle, this idea that to grow, you must first let go. And although maybe you can do something better than somebody else, if that's not your life's task, your unique life's purpose, you should probably pay somebody else to do it. Books like Buy Back Your Time, right? They 10x is easier than 2x I see on your shelf, right? They're preaching this idea of outsourcing that which you don't add as much value as you do when you're focused on your family, your life's purpose, your travel, your business. And so we set up Members Wealth to work with these types of families, right? 2 million and above typically. And they begin to outsource their risk management, their investment management, their tax, their estate to us. And it works for them because then it frees up their time to take their businesses or their families to the next level.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. You keep talking about risk, and I bring that up because what I find, and especially in today's atmosphere, nobody understands risk. Like, and I don't mean nobody, but most people, oh, what kind of an investment return can I get?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily ask, what is the risk associated with that return? How could I possibly lose money in this deal? They don't even think about these topics. And that once you have money, that's really the question. How do I protect what I have? Warren Buffett, there are 2 rules. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, see rule number 1.
Yes.
Right? But yet, how many people have that mentality to say, what is the risk? How do I evaluate risk? How do I reduce risk and do all of these types of things?
It's a fantastic question. We spend a lot of time. I mean, first off, is you have to define what risk is to an individual or to a family or to a business. Like, how do they think about risk? If you just ask somebody, what's risk or what's scaring you, what's risky, you'll get all types of answers. And so our process, we ask open-ended questions, but then we also ask leading questions. And you're talking about investments, and there's, of course, risk with investments, but there's risks with tax and fraud and liability and whatnot. And so for most of our families and myself, right, we spend so much time early in our lives taking risks to create wealth, right? Like we are working, changing jobs, investing, taking risks. We're not really thinking about risk. We're just taking lots of it, right? And to some degree, you need to take risks, right? You can't not take risks to create wealth. So you have to just take the risks you're comfortable with. And you'll see in our line here, it doesn't say take risk and create wealth, right? It says preserve, grow, endure, evolve, right? And the idea is it goes all the way back to the family office, right? So our families and those families hundreds of years ago create wealth. And then we start to organize it to preserve that wealth so it can grow, so it can endure over time. And then things change. So it's got to evolve. There's iterations. But first is defining what risk is, and then we help them think about other risks. And I love reading books on risk. Against the Gods is one of my favorites, and there's plenty of ways to think about risk. But if you think about managing wealth, Rocky, we say you want to manage your wealth right, and it's an acronym, RITE, and risk is the first one. And so you really should think about risk before anything else. And then you get into investments and then tax and estate. And too oftentimes people skip that R, right? And they jump right to, investments, right? Which is fine. We let our families dictate. And if they want to talk investments first, fine. But we always cycle back to risk. And we want to make sure that their money's there for them when they need it.
And that's important. Along with that is the mundane side of managing money, which is making sure that you have legal protections in, because that's where risk comes from, making sure that you have defined how wealth is transferred and having the paperwork in place to be able to have an easy transfer of wealth as you age out, and being able to do that. At this point, you're managing more complex taxes. And choices aren't always easy. There's pluses and minuses to everything. And it's looking at the tax planning much more holistically, the investments that you do, the real estate itself, if they're involved in real estate and business, how is that all put together? And then making sure all that little bits of paperwork get done. And I don't know if you heard, but the BOI form is back on again.
Yeah.
You talk about the cluster of our government back and forth a million times with more paperwork. And if you don't do paperwork, you get yourself in trouble. Like even trademarks, right? People forget to renew their trademarks or renew their websites. All of these little things have to get managed somehow. And having the people to pay attention to the things we forget, I think is important to be able to manage it all.
Yeah, implementation and execution, I think, are the most important services we offer, but they're probably the least valued at first from our clients. But that consistency, we do quarterly meetings, the accountability, the takeaways, what we have to do, what they have to do. We have checklists for everything. We're not perfect, right? Every time we learn a lesson, the checklist grows a little longer, and we double check and triple check. And it takes time. We do it behind the scenes for the family. We do it for a very reasonable fee. But it's amazing. We just brought on a client, and unfortunately, it was a partnership, and the partner passed right before we brought on the client. And just some real simple fixes, if we had known them, over the last few years, would have saved them millions of dollars. Right? There was a 401k without an account beneficiary. And it happened to be in the year that the required minimum distribution started. And they hadn't taken their first required minimum distribution because they didn't have to quite yet. And because of all that, the entire 401k is paying out to the estate and is 100% taxable immediately, rather than being paid out over the lifetime of the heir. And there was a will, but there wasn't a beneficiary, so it didn't flow through correctly. And so it ended up in probate. And this is a simple fix. So you think it sounds really easy, but we check account beneficiaries over and over on all the accounts for all our clients, whether we're managing them or not. And you think about how much you can save on something so simple like that. It's frustrating when you see it go the wrong way.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that people have gotten divorced and didn't change their beneficiaries and gotten remarried. And that's a wonderful fight at the
nothing like the ex-wife getting $1 million and the new wife getting nothing, right? And so
yeah, it happens more often than not. I think the other part of this, though, is those first generation families, as they build wealth, they have to pass it on, and you also have to prepare the kids and the grandkids to come into wealth. Do you guys get involved in that?
I would say that's probably the most rewarding part of the job. I don't know how familiar you are with the whole process, but a lot of times families do at some point wake up to the fact that there's money around and that they have to do some sort of estate planning, right? And wills, power of attorney, medical directives, maybe a trust gets thrown around, maybe some complex estate planning. But what we find is most estate attorneys and law firms are very transactional, right? You pay them a fee, typically an hourly fee, And they'll ask you some questions. They'll draft up all these documents. They'll ask you to review them. There's a couple hundred pages. You don't know what you're looking at. You sign them, you put them in a drawer, and then life goes on, right? And that's not where it should end. And that's not the most important part. I mean, it's important. It has to get done, and then all the I's dotted, T's crossed, and account beneficiaries checked and whatnot. But where we step in, where most law firms kind of leave off, is in that legacy education, legacy planning. See, our clients aren't transactional, they're relational. And so we're with them for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? Somebody in their 40s or 50s hires us, we're going to be with them a very, very long time. And so we get to know their children and their grandchildren. And we do something what we call family education meetings. Some might call them family governance meetings. But after we've met with the first generational wealth creators, we start to understand what their family core values are. So it's not just writing the legal document, it's writing down what their values are. And then we start to instill those values and help them. You have kids and I have kids, right? And we know sometimes they listen to teachers and coaches and other people more than they listen to us, right? And I hear time in and time again, right, from families. Dane, you just said what I've told them on a lot of these things 25 times, but they came out all excited and they're going to do all this. And they called us and they're maxing out their 401k and they want to be involved in this, that, or the other thing. And I don't know what that is, but because you and I have lived it with our own children, we know it's the case. And so what we get to do is then, if you understand education too real well, it compounds. And so we just do little bits at first with the teenagers, more with the 20-year-olds, and then more with the 30 and 40-year-olds. And we're there. And by the time they stand to inherit the wealth, the goal is that they don't need it, right? But it's there, right? And that their values can instill and move on. So it's something where business owners think it's succession planning for their business, right? But oftentimes they're not thinking succession planning for their wealth. And they might just think about how I leave it to them, maybe how I put it in trust and tell them how to do it, with trust rules. But it's really an educational process, and one you want to pair up with a firm that really cares about and enjoys doing it, which we love to do it.
And the reality is inheritances are like lottery winnings. They tend to disappear in a couple of years unless you've been prepared to handle money.
Absolutely. I mean, I myself, honestly, every 10 years older I get, I go, I'm ready now. But then when I get 10 years older, I go, I wasn't as ready 10 years ago as I am now, right? And I'm in the wealth business, right? But there's a lot of things you have to learn about money and back to the trial and error on everything. And so it's good for the kids to learn. And then we do set up structures and educate the children. It's not to control the money and control them after mom and dad die. It's really to protect them. And so once the kids understand that like something like a trust is there to protect them, not to control them, right? Because what if mom and dad pass and you inherit this money and you're in the middle of a divorce or a bankruptcy or some other event where they can then attack those assets, right? And they show up in court. But if they're in trust, they're protected. And once the kids start to understand that, it's a win-win for everybody.
And that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of education and a lot of things that I think most people don't ever talk about. As it is, we're not taught money. You're not taught generational wealth. And then how do you make generational wealth last over time? So one of the things you kind of talked about, and I think you've kind of gone through it, is that whole second phase of life, right? Once you got the money and that round didn't exactly make you happy, it's finding that purpose, finding new passions, finding the things that when you have the money to be able to do it on your terms, to really define what that part of life looks like and how do you live it and how do you make it fun?
Yeah, the advice we give folks is to treat that process like they did building their business or their career, right? It takes some time. It takes iterations. Get a coach, get a teacher, pair up with a firm that's gone through it, join a networking group like a GoBundance or work with a firm like Members Wealth. But it's not a snap your fingers and it's done. It's really thinking long and hard, reading a lot, of course. What makes you happy? How do you define happiness? What are your core values? We all have core values. when I went through the exercise to figure out what my core values were, I had them. I just didn't openly talk about them and know what they were specifically. And so that second phase of life, it can start at different times, but for most of the families we deal with, it's when they wake up and they go, I have enough, I can stop. Or I think I have enough, can I stop? But either way, I don't want to spend the next 20 to 30 years doing the same things I did the last 20 to 30 years. And when they have that realization, it's scary at first. Some call it a midlife crisis, right? And so, what in my mind, I'm always dealing with are midlife crisis millionaires, right? These are successful people they're millionaires, right? But they're in a midlife crisis, and maybe it's not a crisis, but it's a midlife transition. There's a book, Strength to Strength, I think by Arthur Brooks. It's pretty good, and it talks about kind of all the different careers that are out there and which ones are short-lived and long-lived, and that transition from peak to peak. I think they talk about it too. And it's this idea that the second half of life doesn't have to be downhill. It can be, it can also be like another high. It's just a different high. So.
I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I think it was like Climbing Your Second Mountain. And it's kind of the thing for most people, the first mountain got picked by somebody other than you, right? Parents, schools, track you were told to follow. And so you climb that mountain and you do well. And then you're like, yeah, this wasn't it.
Yeah.
And it's figuring out the second mountain. What is it that you want to do on your terms, in your way? And I always tell people you should have a life plan. And I find so many people, it's just difficult to get them to want to take the time and effort. And there's a lot of fear with people to even do it. And I don't know why. I kind of find that odd, but people are just afraid to create their life plans.
Yeah, it's I think there's a whole host of reasons. I mean, I was definitely on what was called the deferred life plan. If you ever read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, I read it a long time ago, and I wasn't enticed by the 4-Hour Work Week. I wanted the other life. I wanted to work all the time and be successful and retire by 50. And my father always told me, you're not going to retire at 50. I said, yes, I am, Dad. I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to retire at 50. Because you might make all the money, but you're not going to retire. And I said, yes, I am. Yes, I am. And unfortunately, he passed. So I don't have, well, unfortunately, he passed, but at least I don't have to tell him he was right? Because he was, right? And I think he knew before he passed that I had made it financially successful. But I think he also knew that I wasn't getting as much out of my career as I used to. And I think he would be proud today to see that I've made that transition a few years earlier than I thought into a world where now I really want to work forever, just not all the time. And what I focus hard on, Rocky, is bringing all my values together. And so I have this interwoven, connected balance between learning and relationships and accountability and ownership and family and travel and wanderlust. And so I try to blend them all into everything I do every day. So no day feels like any other. They all feel great, right? I don't care if it's Saturday or Tuesday. They're all good.
And we do that pretty much every Friday and Monday. I go live on Facebook, and it's always Happy Monday, Happy Friday.
Yeah.
And if it isn't Happy Monday, that's your fault. Right?
Yep.
You know, days should be the same. And you have to take the effort to figure out what it is for you. I thought too that I would retire and retire early. Now I'll never retire, but my retire and my play and my life, my fun, they all just intertwined. They all go together. And the things I don't want to do, I don't do. And I don't care. And it's not like I'm killing myself working tons of hours, you know. I have figured out the answer to the question, how much is enough? How much is enough time for this? How much is enough money? And I can play within those amounts and have fun. And, you know, it's like a wave. Sometimes this goes up and other times that goes up. And I'm learning to just surf and have fun as however it comes. But I really do enjoy the work part of it. It makes everything else more fun.
Yeah, when it really clicked for me is when my life's purpose overlapped with the purpose of Members Wealth and its employees and then our clients. And when they all came together, it was real clear to me that if I help elevate the financial lives of other families, they can then elevate their lives to achieve their life's purpose. And our employees and partners here at Members Wealth all feel that same way, right? We have them on that pathway of having that balance, and they love helping our clients. They're getting what they want out of work. They're getting what they want out of their lives. And when you start focusing on that first and foremost, everybody wins, right? The business wins, the employees win, the clients win. That's a triple whammy, a triple winner. So we like those.
But you have to know the answer to the question. What do you want?
And it's harder than you think. We work to try to get our employees to think about 5-year visions. And a lot of people are scared to write them down. You have to focus, and we do this with our clients, and it's hard too, especially the younger they are and the longer off supposed retirement is. It's what do you want, right? And they're scared to write really big goals, I think, because they start to focus on how am I going to achieve these. And I never ask our clients or our employees, how are you going to get to your goals? That's not my first question. It's like, what are your dreams? What would be the ideal situation, right? Tell us that, and we'll figure out a way to get you there. But I think too many people, myself included, I think part of the reason I hit my goals so early was because my dreams weren't big enough, and I capped myself out of fear. And so although I had goals, I capped myself out of fear. And I think a lot of folks do that. So part of what we do is help people open their minds, employees, clients, say, tell us what your biggest dreams are. Let's see if we can make them a reality.
I don't know if that's the right question. And I'll tell you why. Because I think people come up with these wild dreams because they see them, not because they want them, and not because they're willing to do the work to get them. It's more, what do you really, really, really want? And understanding that. And I don't know that it has to be big. I would assume if you had honest conversations, it's, hey, I want the kids and the grandkids to be happy. I want us to all be together at events and take vacations. And it's not that I need to make another couple $1 million this year.
No, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not always revolved around a money number.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that's what we're told to believe. It's all about the money or the impact. Oh, I'm going to impact 1 billion people. I'm like, how how much work that takes? Are you willing to do all those different things that you have to do? And a lot of it isn't fun. It's nice to want to impact those people, but I don't want to do all that work. Sorry. So I'll find a goal that's more in line with what I'd rather spend my time doing. So out of curiosity, we are in weird economic times. I think this is the slowest moving global crash that I have ever seen happen, where all the signals are counter to what they're like. You're getting warning signals along with investment, like go wild and no, put risk on. And what are you guys seeing in the market right now?
Yeah, so they were the best of times. They were the worst of times. Yeah, I mean, I've read that intro, not only in Dickens, but for investment letters for my entire investment career. So I always love it when people talk about the uncertainties of the market and is it good or bad out there?
And I don't think it's the uncertainties of the market. It's the fact that, the Fed lowers interest rates and interest rates go up. It's the amount of debt that the government and the people have. It's all that free money that came out with COVID causing inflation. And I mean, housing has become unaffordable for many people. I mean, if you're a millionaire, it's no big deal. But if you're an average working person, it's hard to pay for housing and everything. So it's all of that I'm more so talking about is, when does the bigger macroeconomic thing come back to what used to be reasonable?
The when question's always tough. I'm not sure. Not sure I can.
I don't know if you have a crystal ball.
Yeah,
I thought you did.
I do. It's cracked and cloudy today. I mean, if you're a student in history, you already know these answers, and it's cyclical. Some cycles are longer and some are shorter. And history, Mark Twain said it. It doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And so there's elements of, could the debt bubble be getting too big and we have to inflate our way out of it? It seems that what we're doing. Could we have a debt spiral where we have a depressionary type environment afterwards, like the 1920s? Could you? Sure. I mean, anything can happen. We're spoiled here in America, right? We always just think everything's okay and everything will just get better, and the Fed will come in and lower rates and print money. It wasn't ever free money, Rocky, right? We knew at some point it would cause inflation. I think what we try to help educate our families with is you have to own assets in a world where there's inflation. And you want to be careful how much leverage you have in a world where leverage could go boom in the night and destroy a lot of value. And so we think you want to take risk and be invested to participate, but you don't want to be out over your skis where you destroy value on the way down. And so you could have years of 15 to 20% returns, but if you get 1 year of negative 100, it takes you back to zero. It doesn't matter what all your good years were. And so I guess in some ways we're in the enviable position of being in a wealth management. And our goal is that preservation first and foremost, and then growing to keep up with inflation and taxes, so it can endure for the family. And so a lot of our job is education around risk and keeping investors kind of invested, but also an eye on the prize, which is what we talked about, happiness and life's purpose. And how much risk are you willing to take? Are you willing to take so much that you would lose your ability to achieve life's happiness and life's purpose? And once you put it in those terms, it's not really about dollars anymore. It's about what's that balance between happiness and money. And once we figure that out, most families find it fairly easy. Although of course FOMO creeps in from time to time. But it's interesting. I think generally we're as skeptical or concerned about some of the things that are occurring in the general macroeconomic environment. But I like to go back to, if you buy a high quality business that's not overly levered with high quality management, they're going to find a way. And so we're not investing in the US government, right? We're investing in or any government for that matter, right? You're investing in high quality businesses with a belief in long-term benefits of capitalism. And that's where you'll be successful. I think capitalism will find its way. So.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the future is unpredictable. Every time I think I know what's going to happen, I'm wrong. So I've learned to let go of trying to figure it out. Just kind of see where it takes us.
It's time to learn the secrets of life.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Secret to living an abundant life. I would say it's lately been a focus on living a life of intention and finding time in the morning before all the day starts for myself. And so every day starts with a dog walk, with a podcast or a book playing. So I learn, I walk, I come home, I journal. I usually then work out and have coffee and really enjoy those first few hours before I kiss my kids and send them off to school. That, to me, is my source of an abundant life.
Yeah, I think I spend about 3 hours before I start life working on me. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I would say I should have benchmarked my happiness as much as I benchmarked my money. And I lived a pretty good life, but I think I wasn't always as respectful to gratitude. And so now what I do more regularly is each year I sit down and across 20 categories say, if I do this in this category, it'd be a 7, 8, 9, or 10, and I'd be happy. And so it's a reflection back on gratitude to say, hey, I had a really good year. I'm really happy. I did a lot of really good things. I don't think I respected that as much in my youth.
Yeah. When we're young, we forget about those things. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Take care of your health.
And at 18, I don't think most people are thinking about that, are they?
Unfortunately, no. As we get older, Rocky, you lose people you love to health-related reasons. It's not always death. Sometimes death is the easy way out. It's long, debilitating diseases that were preventable. It's horrible to see. I think wisdom is wasted on the youth. So sometimes saying these things to 18-year-olds would be a waste of time. I don't believe that anymore. I've heard from my younger brother that although it seemed like I was wasting my breath at the time, a lot of it did seep in, and he heard it, and he was thankful for having that wisdom showered on him all those years. So I think we still have to, even when our kids don't listen and they listen to other people more, or the youth don't listen, I think it's wise to share wisdom that you learn. And so I think it's a really good question. But health doesn't have to be at the expense of all the other things. And that's the other thing we learned. You can have and focus on health and still have fun, still make money, still work, still build a family, but just make room for health in your life every day.
And that's the one thing I think people don't realize is health is like money. It compounds. And so you don't do things too well, it will compound negatively over time. And you don't necessarily notice that until way too late. And then it's too late to fix it.
The unfortunate part. So.
That it is. If people would like to learn more about you and the firm, where can they find you?
Of course, we have a website. It's memberswealthllc.com, memberswealthllc.com. You can hit me up with an email. It's just my first name, Dane, at memberswealthllc.com. Love to hear from you. Love to talk about life, intent, and purpose. Share some of those dreams with you.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. Have a good one.
How good are you at the mundane parts of managing your wealth? Do you know how to hold on to money? Make sure all your legal paperwork is up to date and taken care of? Staying on top of tax planning, not just tax preparation? The rules keep changing, and there's so many different things to think about. And many of them are specific to your family and your situation. I suggest you educate yourself, and if you need help, get it done. Find people who can help you. But just be careful of the advice you receive. There are too many wild and crazy ideas out there that sound wonderful, but are actually destructive to your wealth. And these guys, when it comes to money, they know how to sell and they know how to get it from you. So again, do your due diligence. Next week, we've got Justin Jones-Fosu to talk about how to respectfully disagree. If you know someone who would appreciate this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.